Hello, this is Justin Ruger with Accessible Beekeeping and More. Today we have our co-host, Jonathan. How are you doing, Jonathan?
Doing well.
And we have our esteemed guest, Frederick Dunn. How are you doing, Frederick, or Fred Dunn? Sorry.
Yeah, you can call me Fred. Yeah, I'm doing great, Justin. Thanks for having me on. So I'm just happy to be here.
So, little backstory. My mother actually follows you on YouTube, and she's the one that suggested that I send my books to you, and that actually started our relationship. And we got to meet at the Fred and I got to meet at the Hive Life conference in. Um, there you go. You have the two new ones. I didn't know if you got them yet.
Yeah. Just wanted to promote you on your own channel, just, for fun.
I appreciate that. So how are you doing today?
Great. Getting through the heat just like everybody else, and taking advantage of the fact that we're in the mid 90s right now. So we took some honey that's been in storage. We had them in hive butlers. So this was a great time to extract because it goes through the filters faster.
Yeah, Hive Butler is a great product. We got one to take around to show students when we read our books to them.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason we actually had you on here is our podcast is about beekeeping with disabilities and making keeping accessible. And
Mm-hmm.
you have a great following of beekeepers and I guess chicken farmers too, I'm sure. And
Yep.
we wanted to pick your brain and see what ideas you have to help make beekeeping a little more accessible.
Mm-hmm. Um, well, it depends, of course, on the disability. I noticed in your thing you had the American Sign Language. You have so for the deaf culture, maybe, and I don't know what disabilities overall we're talking about. Um,
So just to give you a little quick background, so far we've had a blind beekeeper
mm-hmm.
from California. I don't know if you know Frank Linton. He wrote the Observation Guide Handbook. We've had him. We've had myself, which is a stroke and wheelchair. Jonathan is spinal bifida. We've had a person with CMT, and I've reached out to a couple people who are hard of hearing and deaf, but I haven't gotten any responses back yet.
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to cover anything from wheelchairs to not being able to see the bees to not being able to hear how they're functioning.
Yeah.
So
So,
I guess a broad range of.
well, I would say the easiest thing to address is accessibility to the hives themselves, and of course, working your bees from limited mobility standpoint. So, if we're talking about wheelchairs and things like that, the horizontal hives are right there, perfectly designed for people that may have troubles lifting things. If you can't get out of your chair, they can be custom built so that everything is right at arm's reach. And the most you're lifting is, of course, the frame itself. And then getting people into the apiary and adjacent to those hives, so hive placement and things like that, for year-round accessibility. So we're talking about boardwalks and things like that where I live. So it's one of the things we think about too. And that's the yard that has my horizontal hives. And for those that don't know what we're talking about, a standard Langstroth hive is a vertical configuration, boxes stacked upon boxes. And the horizontal hives can be anything from a top bar hive, which may be new to people, which is one of the older methods for keeping bees, by the way. And then there's a cathedral hive, which is also a horizontal format. And then there's the long Langstroth, which is a horizontal version of the vertical Langstroth hive. And the reason it's called that, the long lang, is because it uses the exact same frames. So compatibility of equipment, availability of equipment plays really well with that. And then, of course, the Layens hive. Jonathan and I were just talking about Dr. Leo down there in the southwest part of Missouri. And that's another accessible hive, but it's a little taller. So there again, we have to think about how would you approach the hive and what's accessible to someone with limited mobility. So those are probably the first things to address because it's physical. Because things like hard of hearing or the deaf culture, um, those are totally different things. But if you had the accessibility, then the other things are easier to work with. I can't imagine being blind, so I don't know if we're talking about legally blind or someone that absolutely has no vision. Um, so I don't know, we're out of my experience area, but those are just things that come to mind for me when I'm talking about setting up my own apiary, because terrain is definitely a challenge for people. And what happens when the weather acts up, especially in the wintertime with snow and things like that? Can we clear a path? Do we have a decent parking area near the hives where it's also not risky to other people that would be there because of the bees? So,
Yeah, the to comment on your blind comment, we have we had Ariel Gilbert on, who lives in California, and she is legally blind. She can't see anything out of her eyes. She uses the smell and the touch of the vibrations of the hive and the sound of the hive to tell if it's okay to go into them. And then she manages the hives on her own, but she has a a partner that comes, a partnering beekeeper that comes to her when she needs to find the queen or do things that require looking for specific things like eggs and larvae.
mhm.
And then about the hives, the only one that you did not mention was the Slovenian AZ hive.
That's is a building you have to get up into. So that's the Slovenian hives are usually they're elevated. So if you had it at ground level and you could walk right in, I guess that is another one. One of the reasons I don't personally like that configuration, um, unless you live in an area where it's so hostile to the bees that they otherwise are not going to survive at all, is that the bees are indexed so close to one another. The colonies are just jam packed. So you have much more of an issue when we talk about drift to other colonies, spread of disease, and things like that. But from an accessible, end of things, being able to draw frames out from inside a single building and having all your hives right there at arm's reach, I understand the practical, gain in that. But for me and the way I manage bees, I would much rather see them spread out.
Separate.
Mm-hmm.
So the Layens hive, I have a company in West Virginia, Bearsville Bees. They're actually donating a Layens hive to our nonprofit. Is there, are they, is that how they're?
Your audio is breaking up.
Sorry, is the depth of the frame double the Langstroth hive? Is that
Uh,
pretty much how it is?
it's not quite double. It's closer. It's about 14 inches tall for the frame. So if we had a double deep Langstroth, we're looking at 18 inches. So, but it is
Okay.
deep.
So
Now, here's a
and
thought.
so what? Go ahead.
Here's a thought. While I'm thinking about this, what if we had a hive that could tilt towards the beekeeper? So, what if we had a long Langstroth, right, that sits flush and level, and we know that the critical level is side to side, forward and back, not so critical. Let's say, and I'm just winging it because this just came to me, but if we're looking at this long lang, and if that thing had a pivot and could tilt towards the beekeeper, and you could pull those frames right at yourself instead of having to reach up and lift up like this, that would be a very
Mm-hmm.
easy modification to that hive, and it would have a tilt pivot. It could go straight 45 degrees and not bother the bees one bit. And since you don't have feeders on, liquid feed and things like that, that wouldn't matter either. So you would almost, that to me, right off the bat, is accessible to someone in a wheelchair better than even just elevating their position so they can lean out over it, because it eliminates this getting forward and leaning over the hive. Now it's tilted towards you, and we're kind of a hybrid now between what you talked about with the buildings, where you get in, they're all indexed there together, because they're easy because you pull them out just like files straight at you. What if we had a tilting long Langstroth hive?
That's funny that you met, because do you remember Ricky Rorick from the conference?
Horizontalbees.com.
He's actually, yes, horizontalbees.com. He's actually designing a tilting hive right now for us to try.
And is it going to tilt the way I just described?
And the last I heard, yes, right towards you. I think he said 45 degrees towards you, so that you can pull the frames right out of it. He said the bottom is done and the top is done. Now they just have to put it together.
He even said 45 degrees.
Yes.
That man, he's a mind reader. I don't know what's going on with him, but it's very obvious once you think of it that way. That's not even a terrible idea for a lot of beekeepers. You know, that's something, Justin, that could be the Ruger hive. What do you think about that, Jonathan? Is that a good idea?
I think it's a good idea. It'd make it a lot more accessible. Like you said, you got to reach over into a regular horizontal hive, but to have them right there where you can reach in,
yeah,
I think that'd be really nice.
Yeah. I'll be very interested to see what Horizontal Bees comes up with.
Fred, I know you use Flow Hive a lot.
Yeah.
Do you think that might be anything that would help a disabled person?
To some degree, but the thing with the flow hives is we're still lifting boxes. You just don't happen to have to do that at the time that you're extracting honey. So we're drawing off honey, which, by the way, if I had been doing what I did today with flow hives, I would have just been drinking coffee and sitting out there letting the honey come out into jars. But it doesn't eliminate the lifting. Also, like in the winter areas, keep in mind that they come from New South Wales in Australia. And they only have a single deep, and then we go straight into the flow super. So where I am, we have to have the single deep and a medium super, then the flow hive, so that they've got the resources to get them through winter, because we can't leave the flow supers on once the snow starts flying. So there's a lot of lifting and manipulation of equipment with the flow hive. So if you really wanted to be independent with the hive, I wouldn't consider the flow hive to be a strong candidate. And when that super is full, we're talking that's a 75-pound super when it's full on, if you're going to pull it off that way.
What about the ones that Ricky has, where he has the horizontal bees, has the flow hive super on his horizontal hives?
Yeah. I looked at those and I had fun teasing him about them at the Hive Life conference. Now I'm a flow hive guy, so but if you get the bees to fill those frames that way in a horizontal configuration, there are a lot of drawbacks to it. One of the reasons is, of course, if we're looking at a flow hive frame, it'd be cool if I had one around. Well, let's say this was a flow hive frame. Now, we've got a problem. Because, by the way, this was not orchestrated. Okay.
You have everything planned.
The bees, if they have to pass through this thing, they can't. So they can't get up and over the top of it. They're not designed that way. So when we're in a horizontal configuration, we have to make allowance for the bees to get around and then access this. For those who bought that modification, he built it because people were asking for it. Because here's the other part. When you go to extract honey from the back of one of these, here's a little port in the bottom. This thing has to tilt 2 degrees back. And then when you break these cells open, it trickles down and comes out this way if it stays level. So then I asked him what modification he had done for that part of the hive to tilt back for extraction. He didn't. What you have to do is tilt the whole hive. But if he's already making a tilting hive, that is built into it.
Mm-hmm.
He might have many angles, no pun intended, on this hive issue. But for me personally, just out of the box, let's wait and get feedback from the people. Somebody ordered that, somebody bought it. Do you know anybody that bought one of those mods?
I do not know anyone that bought one of those mods, but I can ask him if he's willing to share.
Yeah. Oh, he might not be willing to share. You think if people won't talk about something, they're hiding something.
No, I'm sure
Okay.
he would be willing to share.
All right. Yeah, because that's really what we need to do. There's nothing wrong with trying things out and testing it. Those frames are very expensive. They're like $64 a piece. But the ones that he had there at Hive Life were not actual flow frames. They were from another company that makes them less expensively. So it'd be interesting to see how it works out, and whether or not the people like it or not. Because think about this too. You've got that horizontal hive configuration. Those frames are in a fixed position because they don't fit the same size slot as the standard deep Langstroth frames. So they're in a fixed position in the lineup of frames. Like this morning, I went out to the lay-ins hive, and because it's so hot, they were all clustered on the front. So I just popped it, pulled the divider board out, and added 5 frames right there, and then restored the divider board, and they started moving back into the hive right away. So they were short on space. If your flow frames are in a fixed position in that horizontal run, we can't just move them down the line and then or checkerboard them and things like that you can do with standard Langstroth or lay-ins frames and things. So there's several, just on a practical level, drawbacks to it. What do you think?
I'm excited to see what else he comes up with for the Hive Life conference, and I'm excited to receive our tilting hive. We're actually having a few hives, different hives, lay-ins, Sylvanian AZ, horizontal hives donated to the nonprofit, and then we're going to use that to do YouTube videos to give unbiased opinions on what works and what doesn't. Myself as someone with a wheelchair, but if we have people who come with different disabilities, they can also give their input on what's hard for them and not hard for them. Mm-hmm. I do know that most colleges, the apiaries that they build, for some reason they put them on hillsides. We went to the Virginia State Beekeeping Association conference this past Saturday here in Waiters Cave, Virginia, and I had a student of the Dr. James Wilson at Virginia Tech keeps their apiary, and his student, his mentee, I guess, is there, and she was telling me that they want to make it accessible, but right now it's on a hillside. So have you had any luck with finding places to build accessible apiaries? Because what my goal with the nonprofit is to try to get at least one in every state that is built accessible, that people can model their apiaries off of.
Yeah, they actually already have one here. It's called Asbury Woods. It's an environmental and nature center, and they already have the boardwalks and everything. Their accessibility is already established but they are standard Langstroth hives. But anyone can access the hives, but of course that's to facilitate teaching and sharing about the bees. So you have somebody giving a demonstration. But as far as accessibility, everything is right there. So the only thing that would have to change would be hive configuration.
Okay.
So reaching out to a group like that, reaching out to them would probably be a good move, because they are very welcoming when it comes to new ideas and being more inclusive and things like that. As an environmental center, they've gone well out of their way to make sure that nature and a big part of their land is available to people with disabilities.
Austin, do you think you could shoot me an email with their name?
I sure can.
If somebody comes to you as an older person, older gentleman or lady, and they I knew this was going to go wrong. And obviously,
what are you trying to say, Justin?
I'm not trying to say anything. I'm saying that what tips would you give them for working with regular Langstroth hives?
So we're talking just general older people?
I mean, people as they get up in age, it's not easy to lift 80 pounds.
That is why these old people, I mean, I've seen a couple of them around, so I kind of know what you're talking about. This older, like they have gray hair and things. But you think about arthritis and what that does to people. So what happens is we think about people's ability to grip things, So in fact, we were just talking about that today. There are grip enhancing frame grabbers, for example, because arthritis affects the hands and you lose finger strength and things like that. So a couple of things have come along. One is handles that go on the sides of the hives. They're made by Be Smart Designs. I don't know if you've seen those or you know what I'm talking about. These little buttons attached to the sides, but these are plastic handles that loop on. So even with your bee gloves, you could grip it and lift it, and you're not in with just your fingertips lifting the box. But we can move past that. If somebody's older and they're starting out beekeeping, I push them towards horizontal hives just because the most you're lifting is going to be a single frame. And if it's a Langstroth, we're talking even a honey loaded frame is about 7 pounds. Most people can manage that. And the gripper that I'm talking about was put out by a company called Little Mule Bee Supply, and it's the Little Mule gripper.
He's gonna pull one of them out now too.
Don't dare me there, Jonathan, because I have lots of clutter in here. Unfortunately, I don't have that. But the company went out of business, but their products were picked up by Better Bee. So you can actually see those. And they're, because when you have those frame grippers that it's just like a piece of round stock that's like a 1/4 inch in diameter, when somebody goes to grab that, it hurts their hands. If you're arthritic at all, it hurts your hands. I mean, that's what I've been told by older people. So
Fred not included.
So the bigger handles are good. I just showed one today. But yeah, so that's one thing. So what they're lifting, a single frame, most people can manage that. Horizontal hives, hands down. In fact, if somebody were starting out and they're a little later, because we look at the demographic, who's keeping bees today, and how many people are there, and what are their age groups. So this is something a lot of people do in retirement. So often, I mean, I would push them towards something that's less physical. This is also why some people get involved with just using medium boxes all the way up. So they're never lifting more than a medium. That's kind of rough on the bees. So, because anytime if your brood box is 2 mediums, then you're going to do an inspection. You're going to split that brood right in the middle when you pull that second box off to look at them. So with the horizontal configuration, again, just more convenient for the person and probably better suited to the bees also. So that's what I would recommend.
You made mention of the lion's hive earlier.
Yeah.
What is the weight difference in, say, a honey frame from the lion's hive as opposed to like a deep Langstroth hive?
It's a full-blown deep Langstroth hive is about 7 pounds, give or take. And these are more in the neighborhood of 9 to 10 for the lands. And they're heavy, by the way. And the frames are, for the foundationless frames, and they're all basically foundationless unless you can buy the heavy wax that they put in there, but there are no plastic inserts for those. I know people have modified them themselves. They're pretty darn delicate. So that full depth run, almost 14 inches in height, if you're going to lay them flat and look at them and stuff and put them on a rack on a nice hot day, you better be ready. If that's a loaded honey frame that's got fairly new beeswax on it, because the furthest ones are the new drawn out ones, they are very flexible, even with the wire reinforcement going down. So a little less sturdy. So you want to keep those vertical all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. But,
have you heard of Agribility?
What's that?
Have you heard of Agribility?
Agribility?
Yeah.
No.
So Agribility is a national organization that helps disabled farmers keep their farms or start farming, and they've recently moved into including beekeeping. And I have been working with Joseph Ricker from National Agribility and Ned Stoller, as well as Adam and Guara from Heroes to Hives in Michigan State. And we have a community of interest once a month where different organizations, nonprofits, education centers all get together on a Zoom meeting, and we talk about making beekeeping accessible. But Ned Stoller gave a talk at Agribility about accessible beekeeping, and they have developed a hive. See that?
Jonathan, are you hearing him clearly, or is that just me?
I'm not. He's got
Okay.
quite a bit of garble there.
Yeah, Justin, you've frozen.
Have you? Is that better or still frozen?
There, it's starting to get a little bit better.
Sorry, we just moved out to the middle of the country, and I'm working on internet issues. But Agribility gave a talk, and they have hive lifters.
Oh yeah,
Of the Langstroth hive. Mm-hmm. It's the super off of the brood boxes, and then you can pull the supers away to be able to inspect the brood boxes. Have you seen that?
Mm-hmm. I've seen the hive lifters. I don't know if you've also looked at University of Guelph in Canada and seen some of their methods. Rather than lifting the hive vertically to spread the boxes apart, they actually have a tilter. So they tilt all the hive boxes back flat, and then you just pull them apart and look at them that way in a horizontal plane. Have you seen that? Instead of lifting it and having to have, vertical separation, they tilt the whole thing back and then they just pull it apart because the bees don't seem to care. But I've seen several hive lifting devices where they have the flip down handles. They go into the cutouts for the hand grips. And then they have the ones that are run by the electric drill. And then that cranks it up. And then they have hand crank versions. So they have different levels of automation on those. I like them, but again, you'd have to have really smooth, accessible ground. I think Cayman Reynolds fooled around with a hive lift system. That's an area that we need a lot of research and development on, by the way. So just for example, if someone were keeping bees, they didn't want to lift anything, or were limited in what they could lift, but they wanted that vertical setup, and they're only going to have 3 or 4 hives. Almost like what engine lifts look like?
Mm-hmm.
Something almost that looks like a swing set design could be above that, and you could have almost a chain fall style thing that would just glide along that over the hive that you wanted to lift and pick up 1 box, 2 or 3 all at once with something like that. anything that involves personal safety and lifting ends up being extremely expensive because of the certification requirements. And again, it's about demand. So we're talking about engineering something, coming up with something that would have to appeal to the broadest group of people that would be using it. Anyway,
as Justin mentioned earlier, we got an aging beekeeper population. So
aging?
Yeah.
What the? Well,
might be something Justin can invent there. And
yeah, so the more people that get into beekeeping that have those needs, then the more opportunity there is for someone to come up with a solution for that. So I like to come up with engineering solutions, but I have no time, so I pass them on to other people. But yeah, that's a mechanical engineering student's master's program, in my opinion. So if you need a master's project and people are out there and they're getting their mechanical engineering degree and they want something that would benefit the public and get you the A that you want, I would say coming up with a lifting device for people with limited mobility related specifically to beekeeping or other configurations like that, I think you get your name out there. Oh, there's horizontal bees. Does he know we were talking about him? You didn't tell him what I said, did you?
I did not say anything.
They said I'm young at heart. I'm not seeing. Would I be able to see comments? Let me see. Should I be able to see them? By the way, horizontal bees. Oh my God, there is stuff. I can see things now. Horizontal bees. Favorite horizontal people. They sent me the coolest swarm boxes, swarm traps, custom painted. Team Annette, Team Fred. They can't even put them out in the woods because they're too good looking. And I keep meaning to put that in a video, but there's the guy that can solve a lot of production challenges when it comes to making something unique and different. So I think that'd be great for old people, like if you find any. So, oh no! Now he thinks. It says, "Were you talking mean about him?" I think he's talking to you, Justin.
I think he was talking to you.
It wasn't me. There's a mean bone in my body.
Ricky, I really like the top of them hives that you've been putting a copper top on them. Those look really slick, I think.
Yeah, I have that too on mine. Copper tops, like the batteries. They do look good. If you need a custom horizontal hive, that's a place to go. Totally. I've always said that. I mean, even before we came on tonight, I was telling Justin Ruger tonight. I was like, horizontal bees, they're the people for everything.
I'm excited to see what they come up with.
Yeah, that tilting hive that I came up with, and he read my mind and started building the minute I started talking.
It's been in the production since Hive Life. You read his mind.
Okay, Justin. I think I'm through talking. I think you're breaking up.
How's the shrew? Is the shrew still around there?
Oh, here we go. Now, they can't get as close to me now that the snow is gone. So we don't need to go there. This is going to be like Greg making fun of me and then posting that video. He asked me to go and get something, and then he edited the video to make it look like I was scared and ran away. But shrews don't scare me. I have a special collection system just for them. But 80% of those short-tailed shrews die every winter. That is amazing.
Wow.
That means we're dealing with the survivors of those groups. So we're talking about special operations shrews that are left out there. So we don't need to talk about it. I want to be able to sleep. Thanks for bringing that up, Jonathan, because it's good stuff. Oh man, I don't even have my shrew flipper. Yeah, I do. There it is. You can spank them with it. Measure spaghetti.
So what's the most unique thing you got in the collection there that you can grab?
Most unique
Yeah.
stuff that other people don't have. I would say my my bee lining box. You ever see one of these?
I don't believe I have.
So you've never seen one before. I wonder if Horizontal Bees is working on a better version. Okay. So let me tell you what this is. This is when you want to find out where the bees are coming from that are not from your own apiary. So you want to find a feral bee in a tree, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we take this out of here. And notice there's little dividing boards in here. And then at the end, we have a glass panel. So you go out there, goldenrod or whatever, and you find a bee pollinating and getting nectar, goldenrod, dandelion, whatever. You get this over the end of it, you get that in there, and you close it on the bee. Now it's in there. So now I pull this end out, and I pull this one out. The bee naturally is drawn to light, so it goes into this chamber. And then once I see that it's in there, I close that off. Now I've got a bee back here. I get a bunch of them, right? So now they're closed into this dark box. Let's say we have 4 foraging bees. Then we flip this back up, and I take this honeycomb, real honeycomb works too, by the way, and you fill this with sugar syrup or real honey, whatever you want. You put that in here. Now you close this. Now you open the middle, and they go from the back. They go, oh, there's honey. And they start feeding on it. And then once they get loaded up with the honey, you open this. And then when they start flying out, you see what direction they're going. And then you move in that direction, and you catch more bees. And you repeat this cycle until you end up in your neighbor's apiary. Instead of the wild tree, you're supposed to find that the bees are in, and then you just run away fast before they see you out there. Because and Justin, yeah. So, I mean, they see old people; they're nicer to you. So that's pretty much it. Free Range Art Farm says hunting feral bees, very interesting process. It is, and it's a great way. You know, there's another window here, by the way. This is just to block out the light. It's a great way to make people think you're doing something really scientific and getting away with blowing off an entire afternoon. That's what that is. So that's kind of probably, I think, my most unique piece of gear. You have any questions about it?
What's the longest you have spent using that?
What are you trying to say? My time is valuable, Justin. I spent one afternoon because where I live, everybody seems to have bees. So I did not find a bee tree. And as soon as I realized exactly where it was headed, I gave it up. And then I said, you know what? This will make a great ornament in the background so that somebody later someday can ask about it. And there it is. Bee lining. And that's the tool that was used by Dr. Thomas Seeley when he did all of his great. Now he's in the Arnott Forest in New York, and he was finding real bee trees. He wasn't just encroaching on his neighbor's property and climbing over fences and walking past no trespassing signs. He was actually allowed to be where he was. So he found real bees, and I thought it was a cool thing. But I would have to go somewhere else to use it and really find bee trees. So there's that. Yeah, like Free Range Art Farm says, it's very much like fishing. Sit around, waiting, drinking beer. Don't drink a lot of beer, because you can fall down. You could be awkward. So it says Tom Seeley uses to find wild bees. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's where he got the idea from. And for all I know, that's the box he came up with the specs on. I think I got it from Better Bee. So I didn't make it. I don't have any skill set or anything like that. So.
You're giving a talk at Hive Life Conference this year, right?
I found that out today when I saw my name on the thing right next to Bob Binney. So he doesn't have a profile picture of me yet, but I think what we're doing is Cayman Reynolds has divided the house a little bit because we talked about this the last time. So we'll have some presentations relevant to those backyard beekeepers, the smaller scale people or the newer people. And then those who want to build a honey processing center for under $80,000 can go over there. And those who want to go over here and talk about backyard beekeeping and maybe some practical experiments and testing and observations, they would go to someone like me. So there'll be obviously some presentations that everybody will be at, but then they'll split it up like smaller groups later, which I think is better because there's nothing worse for a speaker than to be in front of a group where you can tell, if you read the room, that a lot of them are not that interested, in what you're talking about. So it'd be better if people had choices and you had a smaller group of more interested people in the topic that you're going to present. So yeah, I guess I am. And Randy McCaffrey, Dirt Rooster, he's on there too. Jeff Horchoff, Mr. Ed, he's in there. There's a lot of people. So I'm thinking there are going to be a lot of options. Ian Stepler is on that list. He was supposed to be there last time, but he got held up. That's why we had a lot of last minute speakers last year. So this year, I think he wants to cap it at 1,500 people. So tickets are on sale as of today. So I'm told. I mean, I'm not trying to promote it or anything, but so I'm told. Castle Hives is here. Oh man, I don't have my Varroa mite model. I left it upstairs, but my Varroa mite's bigger than Brian's. So I'm just letting you know. And I think his has a broken foot. His foot's missing. I think he throws it around when he's not on camera. What else should we talk about?
Has been fighting with one of the VSH bees or something and lost a leg.
Those Purdue ankle biters, you don't play games with those. You don't play games.
Horizontal Bees said that Cayman Reynolds sold 250 tickets in 2 hours.
Oh wow!
Think about that. Are you going to have a display there, Justin? You going to sell your books?
Yes.
Because that worked out really well, I think, for you last time.
Yep, I'll be there with my books, and the Accessible Beekeeping nonprofit will have shirts, and I'm hoping by then to have something to display. I'm trying to get in contact with UVA's fabrication lab to work on a hive gripper for somebody with Parkinson's that uses like a gimbal to hold the frame steady while they may shake.
Okay.
So that Agribility actually asked about that because they didn't know if we had any ideas. So I'm trying to get somebody to talk to about designing that.
Okay. Yeah, there have been attempts at, you open up the hive box, you take your cover off, take the inner cover off, and then there's this translucent manipulation box that goes on top of it. And it has the frame pullers and stuff like that. It had some real rough functioning to it that didn't pan out, and then they kind of abandoned the project because this was years ago. But the thing was, it was for a training situation where you could set it in a room where everybody could be there, and then these mechanical arms, these robotic arms, manipulate the frames, and then everybody can see it in an education setting. This would also work for someone like you're describing because it's like toggling and moving things down rails. But it had some hiccups, and I also think they didn't see a broader application for it, so I think they backed off. Because you also had to get that thing off and then reassemble the hive and close it up afterwards. So I have seen something like that.
Any advice for somebody giving a talk in next Saturday at a small conference in North Carolina.
Who is this somebody that's giving the talk, giving advice to? Are you talking about yourself,
Me.
Justin?
Me.
You know, you can say, "Hey, Fred, I'm giving a talk." Well, this depends on, it's a conference. So what kind of conference? Who are these people?
It's the Bee Jubilee in Oxford, North Carolina. It's a festival that this year they combined a festival and a conference all into one day. Next year they want to split it apart to a festival on Saturday for the kids and families, and then the conference
Okay.
for beekeepers on Sunday.
So are you going to be talking to kids because you have your children's books and everything?
I'm going to be talking about accessible beekeeping, and then I'm also
Okay.
going to be reading my books at specific times during the day to the kids.
Mm-hmm. Because I have lots of tricks up my sleeve when it comes to talking to kids, like third graders and stuff. But when it comes to adults, it's a whole different thing. But with the kids, it's fun to teach them, get them involved and make them physically do things. So there are puppets that are bee puppets that go on your hand. You know what I'm talking about? So I give those out to kids and I have them each get a puppet on their hand. And I get those they're kind of funny looking felt flowers that are all different colors and they're like pipe cleaners. So you can bend them and shape them. And I put those all around. Then I have one of the kids with the puppet go to one of those flowers. And what would they be finding? And that's the introduction to, first of all, why does the flower need the bee to do that? Because this flower likes that flower, but it can't touch that flower. So it needs the bee to do all the touching for it. And then that bee gets nectar and pollen, comes back to the other bees, but the other bees can't see the flower just visited. So how's it going to do that? Then that's an intro to showing whoever's got that puppet, they have to do a waggle dance to convince those bees where it is. And then we put up a fake fixed position where the sun is in the room. And we teach them to interpret that waggle dance and to deliver the information to the other bee holders based on where that sun is positioned. How much would you waggle? How far will they have to go? And see if they can really find where this bee is telling them that resource should be. And that's a lot of fun. It works on multiple levels, but kids, it really works on kids. And then that's your segue to talk more about, now they brought those resources back to the hive. What are they going to do? I don't know, kids. Maybe Honey could teach us a little bit about beekeeping, So that's my, I do cold presentations sometimes, but you really kind of have to know what their level is, what they expect from you. And kids it never gets old because you can just pick on them and get them to say things to each other. And it's just really funny.
We have a question from Free Range Art Farm. Have you ever heard of BeeWise? It's a fully robotic beehive.
Yes. And it comes in a container. It looks like a shipping container, right? And they're hugely expensive, but they tie in all the latest tech. They manipulate the hives. It's hands off. The system sits out there. It listens to bees. So there's a lot of acoustic research going on there too. When the hive is healthy, the sounds it makes. When it's stressed, sounds it makes. It also, in the long term, they want that thing to sense when there is brood. There's a brood problem, like foul brood, for example, but they also want it to detect mites, and then they want it to dose the hive. If I'm talking about the same, maybe free range art form, we'll see if that sounds like what they're talking about, but it looks like a big metal container, just like a shipping container. And that thing has the hives in it, and it runs itself. It's full automation. So is that it? Free range? Did I get the right one? Is that what we're talking about? Because this ties in. I've provided a lot of acoustic research and stuff for bees that are stressed and things. Also, we know that Queen's pipe. And so, yep, that's exactly what is referring to. So Yeah, and I think they're dirt cheap. Like maybe you could get one for $1.3 million or something. I don't know what they cost. They're expensive. It's high tech. It's in research and development, and I have to say I'm not a fan. Now that I've said that, and all the great tech and robotics and everything that's going into it, the reason I'm not a fan is because I'm a people person, and I want people to be engaged with bees, and I want
Mm-hmm.
people to be manipulating the hives, and I'd really like us not to create this big high tech insulation factor to get the kind of the human out of it, especially when it comes to dosing and treating and sensing varroa loads and things like that. Those algorithms are constantly being developed so that the tech, and because when it pulls up frames, it'll be scanning frames. So we have other precedents for that, like bee scanning, which is that app for your phone that looks for mites and things like that. That is getting really good, by the way. And the more people that report their findings and the erroneous findings of the software, the more it's being developed and the more improved it is. And now they identify brood issues with it. So it's very interesting. Plus, they read the frames and it will tell you right off the bat, you have 3,200 capped brood on the side of this deep frame. So it also lets people know the strength and the build potential of that hive. So it's really, I don't know, I kind of want to go old school on it and get it back in the hands of people. But there must be some middle ground to where we can benefit from that technology, especially for people that without it would not be able to keep bees. So that's great. But for people that can get into the hives and do things themselves, I'd really like to see it as organic as possible. How does that sound?
Sounds awesome.
Okay.
Jonathan? Free Range Art Farm said, I'm just thinking reusing the technology, not using the actual product.
Okay.
And
yeah, the
then
technology again, because this is never just one person doing it. These are teams and research groups, and they're finding people that have strengths in specific areas, and they're pulling them all together for these bigger projects. So, and I'm just lucky that I get invited to give an opinion on things like that often. Castle Hives is leaving. See you later, Brian. Did he already leave? Was it too late? So
he's going to his stream, which ends right after ours, or starts right after ours.
Oh, we have competing streams?
No, we're before them.
Oh, so it's not a competition?
I can't measure up to them.
What? It's just Bruce and Greg and Brian. I mean, what? They're just going to like make fun of everyone that's not there. All right.
Fred, what was that app you were referring to again?
The app is called Bee Scanning, and it's, Bee Scanning. It's the Bee Scanning app. I don't have my phone, but it's easy to find. Bee Scanning.
And it's on Apple and Android?
It's on Android. I don't know if they have an Apple version. I think they were working on it, but it works good. I use it to identify hives that require treatment. I do not use it to identify a hive that I would consider free of varroa mites. So in other words, it saves you having to do sugar rolls or having to do the washes to kill the bees to count the mites. Because if you can do a scan on it and it shows you that you have mites and this hive requires treatment, then we know that we're not going to get fewer mites when we do a wash. So that identifies very quickly a colony that needs attention. On the flip side of that, if you don't get any mites, because the mites might be hidden up on the abdomen of the bees, then you still do a mite wash to consider it clear of mites or not requiring treatment. So it's a very handy tool, and it works pretty well and better all the time.
The Bee Scanning is available on iPhone, and the latest update was a month ago.
Okay.
So it's still being put through production.
Yeah, it's a good program, and like I said, they're always improving. So based on feedback from all over the world. So a good group of people. Yeah.
Was there anything that you would like to add in terms of accessible beekeeping before we end this and head over to the stream team?
No, just that if somebody is brand new to beekeeping and they're getting started and they're picking the site location for their apiary, always think well down the road to accessibility issues and things like that. Like you mentioned, the hillside apiaries and things like that on steep embankments. Always consider that one day, you're going to be older than some people, but But so yeah, so think ahead. I mean, like even when I designed and built the house I'm in right now 20 years ago, and I put handles on that have the paddles on them, because I knew that I would someday get old. That day will come eventually, Justin. And
Eventually.
then I won't, then I'll feel like I won't. I'm so glad that I got those paddles instead of the knob that you have to grab. Same thing in beekeeping. Think ahead to accessibility. How well is that going to work out for you, your friends, and if you make it for when you're in your more delicate years, then it'll pay off. So if you're citing it now, think in terms of accessibility.
Anything else, Jonathan?
I don't believe so. I've sure enjoyed the chat here and learned a lot from Fred here. I've been a big fan and glad we got to pick your brain a little bit here and see your most unique item back there.
Most unique at arm's length.
Yeah.
So, well, Jonathan and Justin, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad we got to work it out and share a little bit and get the wheels turning. You never know who's watching or listening, who has a great idea and the ability to make something really happen. So I hope it all works out great.
Well, thank you both for being here.
Yep. Thanks, Justin.